It just bugs the shit out of me how a country like the US, with so many wealthy people, so many millionaires, so many billionaires, so many resources, can't and or refuses to tackle something like homelessness. It's gotten so out of control. If you see some of these places in California and many other places across the country, you will be completely baffled by what you see. It's crazy that it's gotten to this point. Christopher here. Subscribe if you like this stuff. Okay, so a sensitive topic here coming up. About a year and a half ago, maybe about 2 years now, I made a video on homelessness in Germany and how it differed from homelessness in America. That video was very insightful. It opened my eyes to a lot of things that I probably just wouldn't have recognized on my own. You guys liked it. The video got a decent number of views, and I'm just glad that I made it, and I'm glad I got to see that insight on how other countries are tackling homelessness. And just as a quick recap, the video was mainly on Berlin here in Germany, but it talked about how they were doing like these pods things to keep people safe and warm in the winter or away from the heat of the summer. It was also talking about actually putting people in really good hotels. I'm not going to go into everything, but the video dove deeper into the topic. You can check that out after this video if you want. But after me watching a couple really depressing, really sad videos on homelessness in America, I just got to looking at it again. I went back and checked out my old video, and then I got into some new stuff. I found a video about how Finland is tackling homelessness. Now, as well as some of these other countries, Germany included, are doing with homelessness, I think Finland has found a good solution for their country. I did start watching a couple minutes of it, but I figured I might as well just turn the camera on and talk about it. So we're going to check out this video titled How Finland Found a Solution to Homelessness together, and you and I can both talk about what we think down in the comment section afterwards. So let's go.
Homelessness is often considered a problem that doesn't have a solution, but there is one country that may have found it anyway. Finland has developed a unique strategy for getting homeless people off the streets and back into the society, and it aims to completely eradicate homelessness by 2027. And although Japan still has technically the lowest homelessness rate, the Japanese success is actually quite questionable, while Finland has been praised again and again for its results. So how did Finland manage to do it? And why aren't we just doing the same thing everywhere else? This is how Finland solved homelessness. Finland is famously the only country in the European Union where numbers of homeless people are actually significantly decreasing, and have been for—
That's important to note, that Finland is the only country in the European Union where the homelessness numbers are decreasing. Out of all the countries in Europe, only one country seems to be getting it right. That's just important to note. We'll see what they're doing here in a second.
several decades. And it's not like other European countries are not trying. They all have shelters, organizations giving out aid, and dedicated national strategies. But most of them, including the UK, Germany, or France, still see their numbers going up.
Why is that? I did that video not long ago, and Germany's numbers were lowering at that time. Now this is saying that the numbers are rising in England, France, and Germany. I wonder why that is. Maybe the pandemic had something to do with it? I don't know. I don't know how, but that's just weird that it seems to be going up now.
So what is Finland doing differently? Well, as they say, if you want average results, do the same thing as everyone else. And if you want unique results, you have to use unique methods as well. And so the Finns have turned the traditional approach to homelessness on its head and committed to a radical strategy that became known as housing first. Basically, there is usually a reason why someone ends up homeless, whether it's because of mental illness, drug addiction, because they lost their job, or something else. But the idea behind how most countries approach homelessness is that the person living on the street should start by sorting out those problems first.
Here's where we run into issues in comparison to the US. The US tends to criminalize homelessness, and I think that a lot of that comes from the fact that many of them suffer from substance abuse, alcoholism, and things like that, maybe a little bit of gambling. The US criminalizes the homeless when they see that they have these issues and these problems. So I'm curious to know if Finland overlooks this, looks past this, and just helps them anyway, because after all, they're still humans and everybody has their problems, or if they somehow criminalize it, which I doubt.
while living in a shelter, and only after that they can get access to permanent housing. This has been called the staircase approach because the homeless person is basically expected to gradually move up through different levels. They are expected to stop taking drugs, undergo mental health treatments, and if they make progress, they can move on, with the permanent housing as a final reward. But the problem is that this approach is not actually very effective. Quitting drugs
It says that approach isn't effective, but I almost had hope when I seen the steps. So looking at the stages of this staircase approach, right? They start off homeless. They receive shelter. In exchange for that shelter, they're expected to abstain from their issues, drug addiction, alcoholism, which can't be easy to do. So I wonder, I heard him say that it's not very effective. In exchange for that, as a reward, they get moved into a hostel. While in that hostel, they're expected to undergo their treatments for their issues. A lot of the onus is put on them first back in the shelter stage when they're expected to abstain. It's only then that they get moved up to actually getting treatment for it. And then after that, they get temporary housing. Employment comes after that. So I think the onus is on them to actually find employment. I may have missed it. He may have said that if they help them or not to find employment, but employment comes at the temporary housing stage. And then after that, I guess it's permanent housing. But he said it's not very effective. So let's see why not.
or managing serious mental health issues is already difficult when you have a home, and it's basically impossible when you're homeless.
Yes.
In other words, we expect people living on the street to do what many regular people are not able to, and so it's
Yeah, so that's what I was saying. It's very difficult to do that on your own. I'm not sure how positive the success rate of that might be. Hopefully they'll say, I really want to know, because the name of the video is Finland Found a Solution. So at some point in this process, something has to work.
not surprising that most homeless people get stuck on one level of the staircase, as
Yeah.
they fail to complete the tasks to move on, and eventually they relapse, get evicted, and go back to the street. So Finland, seeing that the traditional approach was not very effective, decided to turn this on its head and try out something very different.
Maybe that was their original approach. He said he turned it on its head. So now we're probably going to get into what they do different to make it work.
Rather than thinking of housing as a reward for successfully integrating into the society, Finland based its approach on the idea that with a permanent home from the beginning, solving your own problems becomes much easier. And so the state started providing permanent housing in the form of small individual apartments, not as the final reward, but at the very beginning. And to basically
So that's what they mean by turning it on its head. Instead of the final reward being housing, they didn't start with shelter and abstinence. They started with housing. Now, I understand something. The U.S. is huge. It would be a massive, massive spend to create housing for every single, at this point, for every single homeless person that's there, because there's just so many. I get that. But if any country is able to pull something like this off, the U.S. can do it. They can at least try. I mean, if you look at some of the other stuff the U.S. spends money on, I mean, come on, man. They can at least try, right? Other countries are.
any homeless person who asks for it, and without strict conditions. People living in the housing provided by the state are not required to give up drugs or go to a treatment, and they're not evicted if they relapse. They are, however, required to pay a small rent, which means they need to have an income. And they have a very strong support system which they need to take part in. In most cases, the housing is provided in centers with around 100 homeless people living in small individual apartments that are looked after by a team of around 20 on-site social workers.
Wow.
And they provide support with everything from bureaucracy, job hunting, and getting access to addiction or mental.
So imagine that, right? That they give the homeless shelter first. They don't even have to quit their substance abuse or alcoholism or whatever it is that got them there or that they're addicted to. They don't even have to stop. They get shelter first and they have the expectation to get better. But even if they relapse, they still get the housing. They're still off the street. So Finland is doing this because it's hard for people to stop on their own when they don't have a home. If they at least put them in the house first, decent shelter first, it may incentivize them to want to do better because they're warm in the winter, they're cool in the summer, They're protected from the elements. They're protected from being shunned and shamed on the street, and they don't have to feel embarrassed about their situation. Just maybe that might be a reason for a lot of people who are homeless not being able to kick their abuses, because it gives them an escape from the life that they're living, their current situation that they have to put up with and deal with. So also said there's kind of a community of people all in an apartment complex who may be going through the same situation. So there shouldn't be any judgment in this area, because everybody's going through the same thing. Everybody's pretty much trying to reach the same goals as you would be if you were homeless in there.
But how it works is one thing, and if it works is another one. So does it? Well, in the mid-1980s, there were around 20,000 homeless people in Finland. And according to national estimates, in 2021, this figure has decreased to just under 4,000.
Wow.
And so it looks like a success. But is it really? The critics of the Finnish system say that this just hides the problem, and the numbers are artificially decreased by putting everyone in government-paid housing rather than actually reintegrating them into the society. And that is a legitimate criticism.
Yeah.
The results are only possible because of the continuous support.
Now, see, if it was the States, oh my gosh, there would be so much outrage over this. For some reason, Americans don't like to see other Americans get or acquire things if it's not in the same way that they got it. So for instance, if I like broke my neck to get somewhere and I finally got somewhere and somebody else eased on down the brick road to get it, outrage. You didn't work as hard as me. You don't deserve it. I don't know where that mentality comes from. It's a crazy mentality though. So there would be like so much outrage over giving the homeless housing if they didn't work for it, if they didn't earn it, right? Nobody's just about kindness, and everybody just doing better than they were the day prior. And I say that even after hearing that some of the Finnish people are saying that it just masks the problem and it's not really reintegrating them into society, and it's just kind of hiding it and just basically giving them a free lunch. Imagine if that was the US.
The numbers of those who transition from government housing to living completely independently are quite small, and if you would remove the government support, the homelessness numbers would immediately spike once again. But on the other hand, that's the whole point of the policy. You don't need homeless people to turn into model citizens who are addiction-free and who are completely independent. In the Finnish model, it's already considered a success when you get them off the street and into a controlled, safe environment, when they're able to pay a small...
So the Finnish just really want to get them off the street and in a controlled, safe environment. I guess that's the main thing for them. Reintegrating them into society isn't the main thing. Did I hear that right? I think I heard that right. And so, see, I never even thought about that. So I guess it would depend on the country, but I guess different countries have different ideas, different agendas, different ways that they account for successful reduction in homelessness. And it seems the Finnish consider just getting them off the street a success, or at least a first success, their biggest success, because the homeless rate technically did drop. They're no longer homeless. So, but the complaint came from how it's not really getting people reintegrated into society technically, because most of them don't end up finding jobs and getting back into society the way people would consider that a reintegration into society, in conjunction with reducing the homelessness rate. And I can understand that. So I guess I can kind of see both sides of it, but that's an interesting thing to note.
Small rent every month, and when they're slowly, one step at a time, reintegrating back into the society. Now, naturally, this costs a lot of money. The Finnish government spends a lot of money on buying apartments and turning them into homeless housing, subsidizing developers who build this housing, heavily subsidizing the rent, and employing a lot of social workers that work with the homeless people. And that's not cheap. But even so, according to Finnish statistics, it actually financially pays off. A study of financial costs shows that Finland actually saves 15,000 euros a year on every homeless person it houses. Even though it spends money on housing and social workers, it's still a lot cheaper than to bear the cost of emergency care, policing, justice system, and all the costs that come with having homeless people living on the street. And so in the end, it's a model that kind of works for everyone. It's definitely better for the homeless people who don't have to live on the street.
Ah, how interesting. So the Finnish are comparing how much they would be spending with the homeless being on the street. The medical care, the unsafetyness, law enforcement, the sanitation situation, they're taking all of that and comparing it to what they're saving by actually taking them off the street first, even if they don't get jobs, even if they don't reintegrate into society. And it looks like they're actually on the plus side. They're actually in the green as far as how much money they're saving by doing it this way, in contrast to if they just leave them alone and let them be homeless. So maybe the US can find a way to balance this. They could probably do the same thing. They would probably be making out on the beneficial end of it if they took the initiative and tried something like this. Maybe, I don't know. There's a lot of homeless in the US, and the US is large. How important is it to have them reintegrated into society? Does it even matter?
Or in often dangerous temporary shelters. It's better for the regular people who don't have to deal with criminality, drug use, and other issues that come with people living on the street.
And that's where they're saving a lot of money.
And it's actually better even for the government that ends up saving money. But if it works in Finland, why aren't we doing it everywhere? And would it be successful? Well, that's a tricky question. And there are both practical and ideological reasons why Finland is still unique in this approach. First, even if you wanted to, it's not actually that easy to just take what Finland is doing and apply it somewhere else.
Yeah.
For example, the basic condition to give away housing is that you need to have enough of it. And since most countries are going through a housing crisis, that's not that easy. One of the reasons...
So then, speaking about the US, so as it says, the US housing market is short 6.5 million homes anyway, and the housing shortage is the root of all Americans' problems. I get that it would not be an easy thing to try and tackle. All I'm saying is trying something would be better than not trying anything. The way it is right now definitely ain't the way. At some point, you're going to have to try something. Maybe instead of building a big eyeball globe, that could be a bunch of apartments, a little apartment complex. I don't know, it's a start.
Why Finland is able to do it is because cities in Finland tend to own most of the land. And so they're able to use that to build a lot of social housing units. But that's not common. And so even though this policy is successful in Finland, it can fail in other places. California, for example, has been trying the housing first policy as well for the past 10 years, but it hasn't really seen the same results. And that's because it lacks everything that is required for the...
Wow, you hear that? They've been trying it in San Francisco, where homelessness is pretty rampant, for the last 10 years. So they have been trying it. I guess I stand corrected. Somebody at least has been trying it.
Unlike Finland, California has incredibly strict development rules and really expensive real estate, which means that building social housing in large quantities is kind of impossible. And even then, housing is just a part of it. In order to replicate how it works in Finland, you also need a really strong social security system, a lot of social workers, and access to healthcare, mental health institutions, and addiction treatment. But California doesn't really have any of that. But even more than for practical reasons, this policy is often rejected on ideological grounds. There is a deep-rooted idea that homeless people should deserve housing, rather than just get it.
What did I say? I told you. So when you put together all those other things that keep this from becoming a solid idea, a solid implementation, the no health care, the housing crisis, the strict building laws, all of that stuff, when you put that together and then you top it all off with the fact that a mindset of people need to deserve stuff, don't be looking for success. So while I commend San Francisco for trying something like this, because I didn't know anywhere in the US would even attempt it, I have to go back and call this mindset what it is, and it's kind of crappy that it exists.
Even though in this case, that's not really what the data and the evidence are telling us. So although Finland has some unique advantages, this model can be applied elsewhere. But in order to be successful, it requires a lot of invested resources, ability to commit for decades rather than for years, and in the end, it needs to be just a part of a wider, well-functioning system of social safety nets that help people from getting off the ground. And so it looks like Finland will probably keep its unique position for a bit longer.
All right, so that's basically the end. We got the gist of the video. It seems like Finland has found something that works for Finland, and I hope the best for that. Germany and other countries in similar size to Finland could probably pull something like this off too, but I don't know what their goals are. I don't know what they wish to achieve when it comes to homelessness. Admittedly, I don't follow homelessness as well as I could, so I'm not up to speed on where all these countries stand and what the numbers really look like, because I just don't research that far into it. The extent of it, when it comes to me speaking on it and wanting to talk about it, is just watching the amount of homelessness rise, the numbers go up in the US primarily, because it's just sad to see. Some of these videos that show this are just depressing. Such a lack of humanity, and it seems people have just gotten over it. Like it's just a normal and regular thing now. It's just a part of how society is supposed to be, especially in some of these places that are known for tourism. Can you imagine visiting and that's all you see is this lack of care, this lack of support, this lack of empathy for a human that's on the side of the street? But hey, you got people who are making and spending massive amounts of money over here right across the street from them. It just makes no sense to me. I don't get it. I don't understand it. But I don't run a country either, so I guess I just don't hold that much weight, do I? This is the first homeless video I made. Check it out if you want. Here's another video that you may want to check out as well.